Thomas. Good. Thomas is from, oh, you know Thomas. He's from Stockholm.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another session of Addiction and the Three Principles. Today we're going to be talking about native spirituality. I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Harry to get things started.
Hi. This is a topic that I have been involved in for 25 years, and it's changed my life. I wouldn't be here in this room if it wasn't for my exposure to the native people and the ceremonies and so on. My native name is Waskazoo Poet, which given to me by Chief Thunderbird Child, an ex-alcoholic. It means standing elk, given to me by Black Thunderbird Man, an ex-alcoholic. One of the greatest elders in my first ceremony, who was my teacher, my elder, was Punchy, Alphonse Peters Jr., an ex-alcoholic. Getting the message? That's all the people were ex-alcoholics. And they have emerged because of the native spirituality. Now, my name means is standing elk, a man of the spirit. Standing means prayers that go directly to Creator. And elk is a person in the old days that the shaman would come. He would assist the shaman when there was psychological, emotional problems with people. And he would point them towards the medicine that would help that individual. So it was kind of a specialist where the shaman was a general practitioner. And what's very interesting is, to me, that is exactly what I do with the native people. I calm their passions and their desires, give them an understanding so that they can connect to the spirit. And as you notice, as you probably are aware, they connect very easily to the spirit, easier than any other people on the face of the earth. They walk one with the spirit. It's as natural as talking about the weather. And that's a beautiful, beautiful feeling that I have caught into. And I'm also a pipe carrier, very special honor in the native world, given to me from maximum security prison. And in Nevada, it's a Tonka pipe. Very unusual on the West Coast because everybody has eagles, but I have a Tonka. And it's a beautiful pipe, maybe one of the most beautiful in the world and one of the most powerful in the world. And it was carved with a nail and a stone from the sacred mountain. I'm only giving you this as some background into what I have walked into. I never asked to be a pipe carrier. The spirit brought that to me. And the reason it brought it to me is something that Steve, my co-guest today, we're going to both be sharing this, it was the only way I could describe the feeling to the people. They wouldn't listen to me without the pipe. It's a little bit like Bill Pettit is a doctor, so people listen to him because he has a doctor. The fact that he's the wisest psychiatrist in the world, in my opinion, is supplemented by the fact that he's a doctor and people will listen to him. In the native world, it's the pipe. That's the most powerful symbol of doctorship that you have within it, a man of the spirit. And that pipe changed my world, allowed me to talk to the people. So we're talking about a world where everybody was, 100% of them were ex-alcoholics, not 20 or 30 or 40%, everyone. And now, and the most alcoholic were the shaman. And you'll have to get an understanding of that to be able to grasp a little bit of this interesting group of people. But within it, the thing that carried them through all of that is what Steve's going to talk about. And Steve and I met on Salt Spring Island I guess it's more than a little introduction. Steve and I met on Salt Spring Island, and he had spent time with Chip and Elsie in a fellowship there, and he had jumped enormously in a very short period of time. It was obvious. He was just stinking with this feeling, and he was talking deep, deep, deep inside. But what we noticed was that we had a sacred feeling connection about the world of spirit with the Indian people. And at that particular moment, there was a fellowship between us that could not be denied. It's taken us many, many years for it to bear fruit for us to talk. And this is our first time talking about this. But I feel very honored to be able to share something with a Scotsman, Englishman, who has the sacred feeling of the native people. And with that, we're going to pass it over to Steve to move on.
So thank you, Harry, for your sharing, and thank you so much to you and Greg for allowing me to be part of this with you. I remember those times on Salt Spring Island and how that connection was there, and how we knew at some time we would get together and we would share. We didn't know how, but we knew at some point. So I'm delighted that it's here and now, and excited to see as a gathering, as a group, where we can take this. A little bit of background to me. I trained as a psychotherapist. I trained as a soul coach. I trained in hypnotherapy and NLP. I trained in many different modalities to allow me to be a better therapist, to be a better person. I was constantly searching and constantly on this rat race of wanting to be better than what I believe myself to be. Underpinning that, although, was this deep sense of connectedness that I didn't truly understand, but felt completely at home when I would feel this. And that would show up in times for me in childhood where I lived in Scotland. There was what we called the small rocks and the big rocks. So this was lots of nature and these big boulders and rocks that we could play on. And when we used to play games such as hide and go seek, no one would ever find me, because once I would get into somewhere in nature and hide, it's as if my spirit became one. And I would have to end up going back and saying, okay, you've found me now, because everybody would be ready to go home and I would still be. And I would notice that those times that I became so still, I became so quiet, almost at one with the surroundings I was in. And the busyness of the world that they were in, trying to run around and find everyone, just didn't meet with the stillness that I was feeling with being at one with Mother Earth. And the busyness that they were in their thinking just didn't connect. So for me, this was something that I hoped always underpinned, even though all those modalities that I learned. But I noticed at times it kept me in my thinking. And I noticed that that really wasn't the best server for me. So when I came onto Salt Spring Island, I really wasn't in a way wanting to be there, but I was aware that something took me there. And I thought it was going to be because Salt Spring Island has a First Nations part. And the school I wasn't interested in attending. So I had the itinerary that I was going to go whale watching. I was going to get a bike and I was going to go around the island. And I was going to go and be with the First Nations. I had a beautiful experience that the following year I went back, and that's when I was on fellowship with Chip and Elsie. So I spent 7 weeks on the island. There was one morning that I woke up and my mind was so full of chatter that as a psychotherapist, I immediately went into analyzing myself and scared myself even more. So Tony, my business partner, came over and says to me, shall we make a picnic and just go and sit somewhere? And we ended up going to the First Nations part. So we went to sit down by the ocean, and we found some driftwood, and we got our picnic out, and we sat there. And the more I noticed the ocean flowing in and out, I became amazed by this ocean. And I just sat and I watched. And the more I watched, my breath naturally drifted with the ocean. And I turned and I says to Tony, isn't it amazing that the ocean knows how to do that? It's like it kisses the beach and it goes back again. And he says to me, but yes, it's the moon, it does that. And I says, but isn't that what's incredible? Can you see a piece of string? It's attached to the ocean, pulling it in and out. I was at one with the awesomeness that there's an energy so many miles away. It had a connection with this ocean, that we know that the actual tides are governed by the moon. And as I sat there, I fell out of my thinking. I fell out of the fear that I was making up in that moment of how I believed life should be. And I started hearing in my imagination what it would be like for the First Nations children to be running around. And the more my imagination started flowing, the more I became so still, like I was in childhood, that I didn't feel, oh, I'm sitting on the driftwood. I felt I was the driftwood. I felt I was the ocean, watching me, watching the ocean. I felt everything that I saw was showing me in this deep, rich feeling, the interconnectedness of all things that I used to feel as a child. I saw in that moment that when we're in that space, which is just not for me or Harry, this is true for every single person, that when we're in that space, it's our soul consciousness. It's the energy. We see that everything has energy, and it has a purpose of its energy and how it's flowing. And I became one with that energy. I fell out of my identity of Steve. And I realized in that moment, even though I had thought about it many times before, that when we use the word spiritual, that if you break that word down, spirit you all, energy you all. And that's where I noticed where I was more still than any meditation, that I used to be a teacher of meditation, or anything that I would do. I noticed when I looked inside, and when I allowed that breath to follow, not create the breath, but allow me to follow the breath, I found a wisdom that it knew how to govern me way beyond anything that my personal identity did. And when I came across the principles, what I heard Sydney Banks say was that wisdom is the purity of thought before the contamination of any human experience. And I saw that that's what nature gives back to us. Nature follows the design as how the creator creates it. It has no agenda. Have you ever sat and heard the trees arguing with one another that you're more fatter or more bigger or have more leaves than me? They grow with the gift that they're given. And what I was seeing in those moments was that the divine that Sydney Banks speaks to, that connects all things. And in that divine, there was you, there was me, there was everything. Everything it gives us life was in that space. And I know that our natural ability is to live from that space. So what I saw, everything that I was learning to make me a better person, was looking in the wrong direction. I was trying to make my form better than what it was. But I see as the formless, that what I was feeling with the oneness of life, there's the perfection in there that allows me to be truth to me in the moment and allows me to be available like never before, without an agenda, without the need to look at, well, you look different to me, you come from a different place, so you're different to me. But I can show up to people and see them as if I've never seen them before. And it's the gift that it gives me every single time. When Harry and I we had a little check-in last week, and there was a story I shared with him was that Tony and I were asked to go and speak at a homeless charity at a staff meeting. And there was a lady who had walked in, and she says, well, I don't know if I should be here. And I says, oh, have you come to the wrong talk? And I was talking about health of the helper. And she says, no, she says, well, my husband's my carer, and I don't know if I should be here. So I asked her, would you like to be here? And she says, yes. I says, well, you're welcome. Come and sit down. So I started talking about health of the helper from an inside-out understanding. And there were some clinicians there who started asking some questions. And one of them was particularly, he was looking after a guy who had a diagnosis of schizophrenia. And he was saying, what do I do? What do I do with this person that's schizophrenic and so on? And what came to me was to say, you know, I know there's a protocol that you have to follow. I know there's a care plan that you have to follow when it comes to this guy. But I see in society that we've simply lost the art of just being with one another. That we're seeing the titles, it separate us. What would it be like for you to just turn up and see that man is not damaged or not broken? How would that be like? And at that moment, he started slowing down. And then one of the managers started asking a question. And then this woman who asked, could she come in? She says, can I say something? I says, please do. She says, you know, none of you really know me. She says, but I've had 2 nervous breakdowns where I've ended up in psychiatric unit. And the last time she says I was in there, she says, I don't know for how many months, but it was almost a year. And the reason why I was in there was because I thought I was the Virgin Mary. And I had a breakdown. She says, but you know what that man is saying? I knew in amongst those moments of being told that I was schizophrenic and something else, I knew I was okay. I knew that I was okay. And what amazed me in that moment is that everybody in the room went quiet when she started speaking. No one asked any other questions. And then I could simply say to them, there is what I'm pointing to. When you hear someone's truth beyond our personal identity, you hear your own. It's an invitation to see the connectedness or the creator, is what Harry had said, and all its beauty. And in that oneness, there isn't the agenda, I must look like this, I must be clever enough. There is everything that you need in that moment to actually flow from a state of mind, which is love. And love is a state of mind. It isn't a condition, the way that we create it as I need to give you a gift or I need to show you this. Love is a state of mind. It's not an action. And in that moment, when I was on Salt Spring, resting in that space, I truly connected to that. And you were there with me. And that great oneness and the truth of that oneness, we see that love within us is the partner to our spiritual nature. And that when we feel that love, there's a stilling down. There's no need to rush. Yet at the same time, if I need to, it will put me into action. But I know, and what I saw in those moments was that we all would have had glimpses through our life of those moments. And then we forget and our thinking takes place and off we go into the world of personal identity. But for me, I used to think that I had lost the moments. And what I've seen, it's impossible because it's the moment that Sydney Banks saw from the 3 principles of divine mind. It gives us the energy to create the moment. It gives the energy of the ocean to move in and out. It allows this world that we live in to move. It allows my hand to move. It allows me to think. It allows me to see beyond my senses. It allows you to have senses to live in the form, but also powers you with the energy to see how we're all connected, to see how you're showing up in the moment. I know that truly this moment right now is the only thing we really have. And it's a beautiful gift that we have. And no one can take that moment away from us. It looks like our thinking can, and we can get lost in our thinking. The mind, thought, and consciousness is still flowing. Wherever you point your direction, those divine gifts will allow you to feel it. And then when you see it for yourself, it allows you once again to feel it from the grace of the breath that you're breathing and the connectedness. It makes everything one.
That's great, Steve. Wonderful. Beautiful feeling.
Absolutely great. I really like what you talked about when you're sitting by the ocean and you're looking at the waves coming in and out. I think that's a great analogy for our feelings and thoughts. The moon is like our thoughts. It's always just doing what it does. It goes around and around, and every day it comes up and every day it goes down, and we don't necessarily connect that with all of the effects it has that we see. We pay more attention to the ocean, which would be our feelings, so we spend all day looking at our feelings and forget that it's all coming from thought. Even if we don't recognize the thought at the moment, it's still caused by that. That's such a beautiful thing. And what you said about don't create the breath, just follow the breath. I love that. That's something that I've learned to do myself, is just follow the breath, and it does make such a huge difference.
Yeah.
Just go with the flow.
Yeah.
So I do have everybody muted, but it's just to keep down on background noise. So if you have a question or comment, please feel free to either unmute yourself or in the participants tab, there's a raise hand feature. You can click on that and we'll get your question in.
I'm going to tell a few stories now, Greg.
Okay.
Yeah. When Steve was talking about the sacred feeling, in the native world, words like healing, there's no fixing problems. It's just healing. So that's all they're talking about. That's all Sid was talking about, was healing. And what the native people have as a gift is they have the ability to sit in the silence. You notice people from other cultures have a lot of difficulty with that. And when I listened to what Steve was pointing towards experiencing, he stepped into the silence. And the native people do that automatically. And that's confusing for white people or non-native people, because they're not actually living in the world of thought very well. They're actually living in the world of silence very well. And because of that, their world is mystical, not scientific. They're very scientific people, incredibly intelligent people, but they participate with the spirit. They don't talk about the spirit. And because of that, they can step into the healing energy of life. And I'm going to talk about why they walk out of it a little bit, or we're going to discuss why they walk out of it as a thing. But I want to tell a story of how I started in the native world. I was obviously on Salt Spring and had a beautiful experience, but I got left behind. I lost my gratitude. People like Bill came into the picture. They took the movement way farther than what my mind was willing to go, and I hated his world. So I didn't even want to even participate in it. And as I got left behind, I took a look, and I had to honestly look at myself in the mirror. I says, I'm gone. I mean, I'm nowhere anywhere near It is, but I still had that spiritual experience inside myself. So I knew it was there. And as I was traveling with my family, we stopped from Vancouver to Edmonton. We stopped in the middle, and there was this mountain. This is going to sound like Steve's story. It's just, and there was this mountain, and I walked up to it, and it was clear cut, scarred beyond compare. My heart cried. The feelings of disgust of white people ruining this mountain in this beautiful, beautiful, pristine setting. My heart was just breaking like crazy. And right at that moment, a Native woman walked up beside me. I don't know her name. We never said a word, not a word. And for 15 minutes, we shared that feeling. And when I walked away, I said, I've got to work with these people. They feel the way I feel. I'm tired of, I don't like the white world. These people feel the way I feel. And I went from that. And then within 2 weeks, I was working as the first teacher in a residential school. And in that feeling, they told me their stories, terrible stories, disgusting stories from the government and the church, rapes and pillage beyond compare. The greatest injustice in the human race, bigger than Hitler, is what we did to the Native people. And we don't appreciate that. We don't hear that. We hear just get on with it. And they traumatized the people beyond compare. And they told me their stories. And this was the conclusion I came up with. I couldn't have survived. I would not have survived. And I came through that. And after I had experienced that thing on the mountain with this Native woman, I phoned Sid up. And he says, I'm coming right over. I go, oh. And it's his birthday. And he's dressed with Barb Banks. They're looking like $1 million. They're going out to some big lavish thing. And they're sitting in my house for about 2 hours. And I'm going, what? Why are they here? It's his birthday. There should be celebrating. But it's the feeling of what I had experienced had pulled him in. And I had started on my journey. And when I went into all these different experiences, I needed it. I couldn't hear what Sid's message was the way he was saying it. I could hear pieces of it, but I needed to experience the mystical part of my nature. And within that mystical part, I started to explore who I was. And each time that I went deeper into the mystical part, I found I had gifts that other people have, but are left hidden. And those gifts started to come out. And within that context, the big question I had was, how does 3P and Native spirituality fit together? And I'm going to give you an image of that because it was a big search for me. And as you know, I'm seen as a man of the spirit with the Native people. I mean, it's quite ironic. This summer, I was up with 100 Native people and the wisest elders in the community, and I'm doing the ceremony, the pipe ceremony. And at the end of the pipe ceremony, the wisest elder gets up and says, Harry's teaching us to pray. And I was very honored when he said that. It was very, very beautiful. Because the sharing of the 3 principles and the sharing of the pipe are one and the same thing. There's no difference. It's just whatever is coming out in beautiful spirit power. Anyway, to make a long story short, there was this one, Keith Blevins and I went up to Shamakwam, and his contribution was small in certain ways, but very big, because the first person he talked to had a huge insight. She was absolutely sad beyond compare. Her son had just committed suicide. The bullet was in the roof. And he talked to her, and she had a spiritual insight, something about the spiritual and psychological nature of thought. And then he left the community and I continued with the community, and we kept meeting each other. And I kept sharing with her and helping her, and we helping each other. And she had a vision. And the vision was what she had seen. She wanted somebody else in her community to see it as well, because she knew they hadn't. And over the years, we kept developing. And a year before she would die, before 50 years old, she took to the pipe. And I thought, this is strange. She's never been interested in any of this stuff. And now she wants me to do a pipe ceremony. And so I said, sure. And she invited her favorite family to come. And it was 2 daughters, a son, a mother, and this woman, Antoinette. And we did the pipe ceremony. And when the pipe ceremony was done, I could see her spirit transferring what she felt to Antoinette. And after that ceremony, Antoinette dreamt a lot about the buffalo. You see, when the Indians dream, it's prayer. It's not dreams, it's prayer, one with the spirit. And she experienced all these things and took to her culture. But at the same ceremony, I gave her the Enlightened Gardener. And she took what she had experienced with the pipe and what Antoinette's spirit had transferred to her. And whenever her little mind got troubled, she found that the Enlightened Gardener gave her the anchor and the wisdom to march forward. And now her life is exploding into all these amazing things. That's how I see the two working together. The native spirituality is as strong as the 3P community is sharing. The spirit is the same. It has healed easily as many people as 3P has healed. But they need the understanding of the 3 principles so they don't get lost in their thoughts. And that is the gift Sid brought. Sid loved the native people, loved them with all his heart. He made a tape called The Great Spirit. I highly recommend you get that if you're interested in the native world. Did he talk about 3P? Only at the very, very end. It was all about spirit. Like what Steve was talking about, spirit, the feeling that we have. And within this, you have to have an understanding. Why have such strong spiritual people have such psychological problems? And why has the trauma been so amazing? And a little tip is, when people come to Bill, they have as big a trauma as what I'm talking about, but they're just one person. We're talking about a collective consciousness, all supporting each other with this trauma. 1 trauma, 2 trauma, 15 trauma, 5,000 trauma, 100,000 trauma, million trauma, all traumatized, all supporting and building each other in that world. And they're collectively, remember, they're a collective people. They're not like we are in our individual realities. They are living with that oneness, that feeling. They do not think in terms of tomorrow. They think more in terms of my kids I want my kids to be secure. Anyway, that's all I got to say for now.
Thanks, Harry. All right, anybody have any questions or comments?
Greg Braden is a scientist and an author, and he had a book and a tape, and the name escapes me right now, but he talked about his experience working with indigenous people, and it changed his career path, his life path. One of the things that he mentions in some of his writings are how the Tibetans pray, and they pray not with words, but with the feeling. They always go with the feeling. And I think that modern life, you're right, Harry, modern life, the white man's ways have taken us away from that connection. I mean, a light bulb will not function if it's not connected with the electricity. And I think so many people feel that disconnect with the real power of life. And that's why they turn to drugs and alcohol and any other way that makes them feel better, because they're not functioning fully. And it's a sad commentary, but I'm so grateful to be a part of the Three Principles community. And in the early 70s, I found the book Black Elk Speaks. And I read that book and I said, these are my people. This spirituality is what I feel. And when I was growing up, I grew up in the country alone a lot of the time, playing in the woods by myself. And when I took a course on hypnosis, the person teaching the course, Stephen LaValle, come up to me and he said, you have a quality that I've never seen in anyone other than indigenous people. He said, when you're hypnotized, you respond as if you're actually experiencing what the person is telling you in such a strong way. And he said, so I had to laugh. I said, yeah, I grew up like my mother used to call me a little wild Indian. So I think there is so much truth to being connected with nature, connected with source, and doing what Sid was so right. It comes with the feeling. You can tell when you're disconnected, and you can tell when that flow is there. Interesting.
How do you, Steve, you say something about that now?
One of the things when you were talking, Harry, and I guess it flows in, is that I love the connection again. Isn't it interesting that when we speak about being at one with nature, we seem to fall out of ourselves. And with what I started, to me, that just really allows us to see again that we are nature in action ourselves. There truly is no separation. And I think what we've done is that we've created a life which seems to be separate, what really is a figment of our own imagination. And we hire everyone to play the role of our fears. And we write ourselves contracts, and we live by those contracts. I remember working with a homeless group, and into the third week, there was a guy who came along and he didn't say anything the first 2 weeks, apart from at the end, we asked them what would they like us to bring along, and he said, oh, tea, coffee and cookies. And we said, yeah, we'll bring that along. So we made sure that we kept our part of the bargain. And at the end, he asked, is anybody having them? Nope. And he had the same white, dirty plastic bag, and he took it up and he took those cookies. That's my supper. And off he went. On the third week, we were exploring mind thought and really getting into the power. Because for me, this is what we're talking about. It's not before, when I studied psychology and so on, it was to look at what we do with the dysfunction or the illness or the diagnosis of what the person has got. What I believe we're talking about here is the power to even create that. But before the miscontamination of our personal thinking, there is a power that cannot be damaged or broken. It's the spiritual formless energy that even allows us to create that imagination. It allows us, so this guy, we were talking about different experiences, and he sat on the edge of his seat. Now, this guy had, we knew had some learning difficulties, but he sat right on the edge of his seat, and he says, can I say something? And he says, please do. He says, when I hear you guys speak, what I just keep on thinking, there's goodness inside of me. There's goodness in you and you and you and you. And he went around everybody in the group. He says, if we just focus on the goodness inside of each other, instead of who we think they are, wouldn't this world be a better place? And we were like, my friend, please come and sit beside us, because the teacher arrived. And then we're continuing to talk again. And he says, he says, it's just like we watch a movie. He says, we scare ourselves when we watch a movie, don't we? He says, it's like we put the disc in. He says, and let's say it's Star Wars. He says, you get the dark, you get the light, and you get, oh, I don't like this part. Oh, I love this part. He says, that's what we do. We play our own memories. Now, that room, these group of people who were still at different stages of being homelessness, went so still. He spoke from a place that was his truth. Beyond, I am a homeless person. Beyond, I have nothing to say. To really sharing a truth that everybody heard. And that group started laughing, started talking, and we didn't have to explain what we do with thinking. We could talk about the power. We could talk about how we listen with our ears, but we really hear from our heart. Nature is our heart. Love is our heart. And when we live from that place, that's when we understand true wisdom. Not wisdom as in, I have a degree or I have this. That man's outside circumstances hadn't changed. He was still in a sheltered accommodation, yet he was the richest man alive in that moment. The smile on his face, the walk in his step, there was no man there with any learning difficulties in that moment. We saw the connectedness. We felt the connectedness. And then we could speak from a different place. And for me, that's the gift of what I've always seen from a child, that the spirit within every single one of them, I always hoped and prayed, is what I say to my God. I was brought up with a faith, with a religion, but I, at the age of 14, even saw that there was something behind that. There was a power even behind that. It confused me in my form. The principles truly helped me to understand that power.
Can I talk a little bit about the power for a second?
Sure.
Yeah. I want to, this power is alive and real. And the more we are consciously experiencing it, it expresses itself through us. That's healing. It's really quite simple. We make it very complicated. I'm going to give an example of what I mean by power from a native perspective. There was this sweat lodge that I was participating in, and I've done a lot of ceremony, a lot. And my favorite, besides the pipe, is the sweat lodge. And with Chief Thunderbird Child, who's a very, very powerful shaman who talks from the old world. His training is in the old world, the ancient wisdom, not the new stuff. And we were taking down the sweat lodge, and I was helping him along with a couple other people, but I was closest to him. And we were taking it down, and about 3/4 of the way, I could feel the spirits leave. And all of a sudden, it was like a dead body. We took 3/4 of the sweat lodge down, and the spirits leave. And I said to him, "You feel that? They're gone." He says, "Yeah, I know. We're finished with this now." That's an alive feeling I'm talking about. That's not a make-believe story of something that I fabricated in my mind. I'm experiencing that in the world of no thought, not I think this is what is happening. And I could feel that. And they call these spirits into the sweat lodge, and the healing comes. So there's a distinct notice of difference from just chit-chatting before the round starts the spirits come in and the healing is experienced. And within that healing, the natives drop 20 years, the same as when someone would go to a conference, a 3P conference. They come out of the sweat lodge looking 20 years younger, and they have experienced the alive feeling inside themselves. But the problem is that they start talking about the same old stuff that they went into the sweat lodge with, and within 20 minutes, they're back in the dismal reality of this world. And you can see how 3P could help them in that understanding type of thing. But don't get caught up with the fact that they don't understand that they are not experiencing spirit power at the highest level. And they are. And they are our teachers. They are the ones who understand about this stuff. But of course, the big joke is inside all of us. And what I found is I can't be an Indian. I can just be Harry Durbitsky, Standing Elk, carrier of the mighty Tonka pipe, carrier of woman's medicine, and talk in the way that they like to hear talk, and be the way I like to be. And why am I in that world? I have a lot of fun. That's it. If I wasn't having fun, it wasn't to change the Indian people. It was to have a lot of fun and to go into feelings. And I'm walking here now in this room, and I know without the pipe, without the experiences that they taught me, I would not be able to use my abilities in the same way. I could not learn to let go. Of course, Sid's message is so simple, and you would find a highly intellectual person, you need a stick of dynamite to blow it away. And that's what had to happen with me. I mean, it only took me 40 years, so you see how quick I was, you know. But it's the gift of the spirit. We're just walking with spirit, guys. It's nothing to do with us. We're just missing the boat so much. Even in 3P community, it's just the level of what Sid was talking about. It's not what Sid is talking about. Sid was talking, we're talking. You know, we in Salt Spring, I don't even know what Sid said. I never listened to his words. Of course, the moment I started to think about it is when I lost my gratitude. But that's my problem. Yeah, you know. So we're here to live in spirit. And the more spirit speaks through me, the more life gets more and more beautiful. That's all I know. What Greg and I have shared together in this room has been through spirit, not through personality and what we know and what we've experienced. I love what Greg has taught me. I love what he shared with me, the feelings he shared with me. But more than that, I love the spirit of this room. I love what you guys have appreciated and what it's meant to you. And when I hear stories of people listening to this after, it's touching my heart beyond compare. And yet, I'm just an ordinary person kissing Sydney Banks's wisdom that he pointed to, and it was always, it's inside you, not me. And that was something I had to, it took me only 50 years to learn that. You know, so.
And that feeling that we have in here, it's only created by all of us. I mean, we can't do that necessarily individually. It's like a musician playing alone. Yeah, they can enjoy playing the music, but when there's an audience and that connection and people get into it, that's really when things happen. That's when that musician gets inspired and they play better and they just have a better time with it. And so that's why we said when Harry and I got together to start this series of webinars, we wanted to make sure this was a discussion. We wanted people to join in and share, and that's when the magic happens. that's when a lot of insights tend to happen too. I mean, I've had quite a few just from the conversations on these webinars. I'd love to hear what Bill has to say, if you don't mind, Bill. There, you're unmuted. Oh.
Am I unmuted now?
There you go.
Okay. You know, Steve and Harry both, I'm just very touched. Steve, it's so nice to see you again. I hadn't seen you really since England. And
yeah, you too, Bill.
And it was very beautiful there, and it was very beautiful to listen to you. And Harry, you always connect me a little bit more to Native spirituality every time I listen. I apologize. I was late because my wife Linda was doing a program the hour before this for Amy Ken Mills's school, and it was very, very powerful also. And I feel like I did then. I feel like that when you have fresh spring water coming down from the mountain, anything you add to it contaminates it. So I don't know if I have anything to add other than to say I'm in. So I know you might think, gosh, Bill must be sick if he doesn't have anything to say, but I really feel that today, that I just feel full, and I feel that mind is, as Linda and as Steve has reminded us, and Harry's reminded us, and Sid used, mind is always with you wherever you go.
Yeah.
And it's manifesting in many different ways, in many different disguises. But to know that you are spiritual energy, divine energy in disguise, and manifesting that, and it allows you to listen to life, and to listen and see in a different way. And I'm just very grateful. I'm very grateful. So that's also, I'm going to stop my jabbering.
Bill,
thank you, Bill.
The question that I want like you and Steve to answer this question. I have, of course, an answer for it in my own mind, but the big question in the Native world is, if they're so spiritual, why do they have so many psychological problems? And I've alluded to that with you. We've talked a little bit about that, and I'm just wondering, and I've asked Steve to ponder on that question as well. And that is the number one question that I hear out there, when I hear it, I answer it in many different ways, but I would love to hear how you two guys describe that.
Steve, I defer to you.
Okay.
You will.
When you were talking, Harry, I spoke earlier on about my training to be a better person, a better therapist. Everything was to work on the psychological self, the personal identity of our made-up reality. Underpinning everything that I did from childhood was the the spiritual that I used to feel. When I went on Salt Spring, and when I heard, I still don't know to this day what I heard Elsie Spittle say, but something went off inside of me that the only way to describe it was a love bomb. But I completely fell out of this form. And I felt in that moment my glimpse of what Sydney Banks points us to. And I saw in all my innocence that what I was doing was looking through the eyes of my psychology to try to get nearer to my spirituality. That was my searching. What I saw clearly within every fiber of my being, that I am the creator. We are all the creator in action. Without our spiritual energy, we would have no psychology. So to answer your question, what I see for myself, for the people I work with, is that when we have anything other than that essence of love, that feeling of well-being, we have forgotten who we are. We have gone into the world of form and believing that's the only thing we are. We're forgetting the power that allows us to manifest our truth in the moment. And the more we go into that, what I'm seeing is that we get into the world of things are good or bad or right or wrong. But I see in the simplicity of the principles that it's still the principles allowing us to be that way. So when I look at myself, yeah, I'll have the bad stick and I will clunk myself over the head every now and again. But when I look, if I was to look at while I'm doing that, I would give the baton, the stick to other people as well to do it. But when I see where that's coming from, there is no stick to beat myself with. I see that there is a truth of our spiritual nature informing everything that we are. Everything that we are. There would be no thinking without that power of mind. There would be no consciousness without the power of mind. And the principles are 3 in 1. You can't have one without the other. When we see how beautifully they work, that we are at one with God, the Creator, who it is, manifesting in the moment, I don't see any dysfunction in there. But when I see dysfunction, when I have someone come to me, I'm working with a young guy at the moment who's petrified to leave his home. He's petrified to go downstairs because he believes that there's someone there actually ready to attack him. And the other day, I've done 3 sessions with him, and in the second session, he had a breakthrough, which he told me on the 3rd one. And all he saw was the power that he made up what happiness looked like and held himself prisoner because his younger brother was happier, jovial, playful, and he wasn't. And he saw how he used that power to keep himself prisoner. And that young man's eyes sparkle like the brightest star when he was telling me this. I didn't have to say a word. He saw mind, thought, and consciousness bringing him alive in that moment. And it was beautiful to see. There was no dysfunction. There was no fear of going outside. And then he said, oh, actually, I did go outside. I went to play in the snow. He forgot. He forgot in that moment because he wasn't believing his psychology or the misunderstanding of his psychology. So that's what I see. When we forget who we truly are, it looks like we're separate. It looks like there's an us, there's an them. And in those identities we create, like what I'd said, that homeless guy had shared in that group. We put in our DVD and we play the movie and we scare ourselves. And we forget all about the goodness that truly lies inside our heart. And we listen more to what we're making up. But it only looks like it's separate. It's impossible for us to be separate from our spiritual truth. And one of the things I really saw clearly, I always thought it was my role as Steve Adair to evolve. No. It's truth, divine truth's job to evolve us. These principles, divine mind, thought, and consciousness, evolve us. So why wouldn't we look towards a place that knows exactly how to give us everything that we need to create everything that we are? So that's how I see it, Harry.
Beautiful, beautiful. In the native world, what happens is there's sort of an agreement on the negative side. And part of the confusion that they have is created from the wisdom of their own religion. And the confusion is something that most people would not be aware of in the native world. Nobody in this room would be aware of it. Is they go into the past and they cry and wail. It's ceremony, always in ceremony. Remember, Bill has a practice, Steve has a practice, the natives have a ceremony. That's their practice. That's their shrink. And in the ceremony, they're taken into this pain and suffering. And then they cry and let it go, and the spirit guides them to the oneness that Steve is talking to. And I mentioned this to Sid. It led to great confusion in my mind. And the first thing he said was, no, they can't go into the past. I said, and then I explained to him, he said, oh, if it's their religion, absolutely has to be respected. If that's their way, that's their way. So they have a different way of experiencing some of this stuff that we have. The only problem they have is because the white man has penetrated so much from the barbaric approach to the past, they have misinterpreted, and the shaman have forgotten that sometimes they have to guide the people. You know how the natives go like this? Up, up, up to the higher level of consciousness. And so they don't understand that it's not about analyzing the past, it's about letting go of the past. And their way is a little bit different, the way they approach it. And so it creates a confusion among the shaman and among the practitioners of the native world with regards to that. But that's their way. And the other thing that Sid said, don't use mind, thought, and consciousness. Do spirit, thought, and consciousness. Mind is just a word. It doesn't mean anything. Anybody can say mind. Mind was for the psychologists. That's what, when Sid started in the universal consciousness of life, he was always talking about truth and wisdom and spirit. And the psychologist came, and all of a sudden he says, oh, now we use the word mind, universal mind. Of course, it's a beautiful word, but don't get caught up in it. It's just the form of some kind of concept, like God type of thing. So we have to walk into the same concept we had in the last show. One of the most beautiful things we had, Steve, was we had the 12 steps and 3P. And we noticed there was a tremendous amount of disharmony within that. And Greg led that talk and so on. And it was very, very beautiful. And it really helped me to sort of see the oneness that you're alluding to. And that's where the answer is. Sid always talked 100% of the time about the oneness. That's native spirituality. They have, except a much more scientific explanation than the white people have, the non-native people have. You know, the 4 directions, 4 elements, the mother expressing things. They have it all laid out. It's a whole world in there. And within that world, they have a connection to the mother, to the expression of the spirit in form. They see spirit in everything, the rocks, the fish, the mountains, the sky. They see it in everything. And that gives them, according to Sid Banks, a piece of the puzzle that we all want to experience. All cultures are just pointing to things that we need to see so we can see that we're all one big global family. Native people are no more special than anybody else, but they do have their gifts. And those gifts are very, very special in my life because I needed to hear them that way. And that's the way it is in life. I needed to hear it about the 12 steps from Greg. I couldn't grasp it without Greg's perception of it. And I mean, it was a great gift he passed to me. He probably wasn't even aware of it. But it's, you know, and the same thing talking to Bill. To have an established 3P practitioner who actually listens to anything I say about the native world, Bill, you have no idea what that means to me. Nobody else does. They all think they know. They know nothing, but they think they know. It's no good. We're here to learn and grow together as a one family journey. And Sid never, ever had anything but respect and love for the native world and the native way of seeing things. But he had bigger fish to fry. He couldn't wait for me to get going with it. I was so far behind. And he had the psychologist come, and that became his way to get the message out. But he loved native world. We talked about it a lot. And he was very, very keen. Listen to The Great Spirit by Sydney Banks. And read the article on my website that was written with two native people called The Native Spirituality and Three Principles. If you're interested in the subject, it's the foremost paper. Absolutely on the topic. Nothing even close out there. But the paramount thing is Sid's CD, Great Spirit. And why did he put it out? Because he knew eventually even the native people would be coming around to the purity of what Steve is pointing towards, to that experience that he is pointing towards. Sooner or later, they're going to come along. And I'm going to tell you something. They're going to knock your socks off. You think we've got it going. You wait. When they come, we're going to see an elevator in the three principle movement. That's my opinion. It's not a fact, but it's my opinion. And we're going to love it. The greatest experience I ever had in my life was when I went to Modelo, when I went to the first Florida conference, and I saw these Black women and these Hispanic women with these feelings of life, with this plain guy called Dr. Roger Mills, who is still to this day created in my mind the greatest project ever in the three principles. And they lifted everybody, and they lifted me, and I said to myself, if Roger can do it in that community, why can't I do it in the native community? Their spirit is what inspires, and they'll inspire you too. Get to enjoy that part, but don't think you understand it. You don't. It's a different world that they live in. And yet it's our world, and it's just the world of thought, and it's just the culture, and it's just the native world. But it's just the way it is. Just like the Jewish people changed 3P. Like that. Just like that.
And it's not to say that we can't experience the same things. You know, my big experience back in 2012, I saw the oneness of everything, and I've always had a strong connection with nature, but it really deepened after that experience. And it's more of the culture, I think, that you're talking about, Harry, versus the actual experience. It's the culture that most of us will probably never truly experience because we didn't grow up in it. We're not in the middle of it, so to speak. So that I just kind of wanted to clarify that because it kind of sounded a little different, but we can all experience the same thing. We're all connected. Yeah. There's really no difference at the core. So I wanted to clarify that in case there was any idea that maybe there was a separation being created, but it's such a beautiful thing. I've always been intrigued by the native spirituality, even as a small child. And the first time I went to the Smoky Mountains with my family and got to experience the culture there a little bit. And there is something to it, but like you said earlier, there's still just as much, if not more problems within that particular culture with addiction issues. So even that under, yes, Bill?
No, go ahead. I just, when you're through, I wanted to add my thing to Stephen too. Yeah.
Yeah. So don't feel like just because you're not part of that particular culture that you can't have a deep experience. You don't have to go to a sweat lodge. You don't have to go to a pipe ceremony, although those things are wonderful. And I honestly myself would like to experience them. But that's not because I think I need them, but because I would just like to have that experience of life. That's my goal in life really, is to experience as much as I possibly can, because there's bits of truth in everything.
That what you said, by the way, I 100% agree with, Greg. I'm not saying it just to be nice. I 100% agree with it. Go ahead, Bill.
I just want to echo again, what's been said, and Steve, you again were so eloquent in both contributions. They were very, very powerful. You're back to your question, Harry, as to why there has been, as Greg mentioned, just some tremendous problems with addiction and different things, despite this really great understanding of spirit. And a couple of things came to me. One was the original statement that was made to Sid, at least as I understand it, where the psychologist, when Sid said, I just realized that I'm really insecure. And the young psychologist said, that's a bunch of rubbish. He said, you're not insecure. He said, you just think you are. And the awareness that the only way that any of us can take away from that universal mind, whatever you want to call it, universal spirit that everybody has talked about, is via our innocent misuse of the power and gift of thought. It's the only way that we can create the illusion of separation. Again, even as Steve has reiterated, it's not a real separation, it's an illusion of separation. But that, and of course, Sid said to the young man, he said, do you realize what you just said? And the man said, of course I do. I don't make idle chatter. But he said 25 years later, that man was still struggling in a lot of emotional and psychological pain, and obviously had not heard what he had said. But Sid had heard. And the other thing that came to me was that, again, reiterating what Steve said, that this energy is with us always, this spirit is with us always. It has been there to heal the native people from the barbaric and dishonest treatment that they received. It's been there attempting to heal them for a long time. But you know what? Innocently, physicians do not heal a broken leg. They put it in a cast, and then that divine spirit heals the broken leg. But you have to get out of the way of you can't check the leg every 3 days to see if it's healed. If you do that 30 years, 100 years, it'll still be broken. And innocently, I'm reminded that what the native people haven't understood is the power and the gift of thought. Yeah. And like Sid said, that's the missing link. It's the missing link between, and just two quick quotes. He said, among the greatest gifts given to us are the powers of free thought and free will, which give us the stamp of individuality, enabling us to see life as we wish. These same gifts can also be the greatest weakness of humanity. We often lack the strength to change our minds. I would say the wisdom. So we get stuck in the negative thoughts and behaviors of the past. And the last thing he says, and of course there's that chapter on thought we all know is so powerful. Thought is the missing link between mental sickness and mental health. Thought is the missing link between happiness and sadness. The personal mind is the creator of all activity. The personal mind is the creator of all misery, all expectations, all ideas, and all false deities. Hope and faith go together. With hope and faith in your heart, you will find the perfect path that you seek. You know, again, Harry, what you said, these are all forms. The Muslims have them, the Jews have them, the Christians have them, the Native Americans have them. And one of the things that Linda talked about today, she said the first time that she ever met Sid, we went up to Salt Spring after, we had both been widowed for 3 years, and we met and got married. And I think Sid wanted to check out my new bride, and Judy and I were walking ahead, and Linda and Sid were walking behind. And at some point, Sid said the following. He said, someday, Linda, all forms will fall away.
Wow.
And what will be left is truth. So sweat lodges, the pipe, the rituals the Orthodox Jewish people have, the rituals that I grew up with in Catholic religion, they're someday they're going to all fall away. And what will be left is the truth. Until then, I think people get lost at times in this power and gift of thought. My wife is telling me we're late for a meeting that we're supposed to go to, so I'm going to say goodbye. I'm going to hit and run. I love all you.
I want to say something.
Thank you, Bill. Love you.
No, I have something to say. Bill, don't leave yet. Just when I talked to a native who had done Sundance, he experienced, when I talked to him about the spiritual nature of thought, he had perfect understanding of it. And because he had experienced it in ceremony. I'm not talking about what you said before, but I want you to be aware they do experience the spiritual nature of thought, and in its purest understanding, in the feeling of it. And it is true that they are caught in the psychological mess of trauma that they have, and of course we're seeing hundreds and thousands of them break away from that with very, very constant. But it did strike me when I talked to this man that the hardest part of what Sid's message is the spiritual aspect of it, and he did have that. But yes, you're right, 100% about how he was experiencing it in his personal reality. 100%. I just
Peace
want
to everybody and love, and so good to see you guys again.
Yes, thank you so much, Bill.
Thank you so much, Bill.
Bye-bye.
see you
Bye-bye.
later.
Bye-bye. See you later.
Well, this seems like a really good spot to kind of wrap it up here. You have some.
I'd like Steve to
Yeah.
sort of.
I was going to ask him to do a little closing, words of wisdom. And Steve?
Yeah, I'm.
Oh, sorry.
See, I'm hoping that you have wisdom, Steve, rather than thinking, Steve. So I will listen to my feeling and speak from there. So I wasn't being rude when you asked me. I just wanted to see, okay, because I can tell you what I think, but this is not what we're pointing to. I just love when I remember when Harry was speaking at some point earlier on, and it really feeds into what Bill had finished by saying then. And then I was a great meditator, and I used to meditate and have guides and helpers, as I called them. And no coincidence, they always would show as native. Or one was a Peruvian guy, so I gave them titles. But one, I would ask questions. In meditation, I would ask questions. And I asked one of the times, why was there a need for a church? Because I was brought up with the faith and I didn't connect with the faith fully. And what I was told was that Since in the spirit of what we're talking about, the Creator brought the collective consciousness together to speak about love and truth. But we developed something separate called, we say now, psychology. And we forgot to invite that in the conversation of love and truth. Sydney Banks saw very clearly, what I've just said, is that we have divided ourselves into so many different compartments and gave them titles and lived from those compartments. But when we strip all them away, that same consciousness that created churches or whatever in the first place is seeing that we don't need a physical place to belong. There is no one more holier, more spiritual, or more richer than anyone else. And the form, it may look like it, but in our true spiritual nature, it is not so. And go back to what this guy, Tim, had said. See the goodness in yourself. Speak from the goodness in everything that you see, knowing that the Creator allows you to be a new you in every single moment. The gift of thought in the moment allows you to be free of anything you've made up and anything you're about to make up, and see yourself like never before. When I look away and I look back, I see you as if it's the first time I've seen you. That's how we're truly designed. We're designed to be magnificent. We're designed to be the tallest stately tree that we've ever seen. We're designed to flow like a stream making its way to the ocean. We're designed to be the fluffiest, white, pinkest cloud that we can see, and also maybe the darkest cloud. But there's still beauty in amongst it all until we say there isn't. So once we see the beauty in everything, we see from our heart. That heart is the part it lights all experience. It's what lights us up from our psychological numbness. And we look out to the world from a place beyond our five senses. And from that place beyond our five senses, I truly see you and you truly see me. I truly see the rocks. I see Mother Earth. I see everything as brothers, sisters, cousins, mothers, fathers, oneness. Sydney Banks saw this so clearly and didn't want any hooks or titles put on it, because he knew that the moment we bring old psychology to it, we'll box it. Don't box yourself in your own truth. See the beauty inside your heart, your birthright of who you truly are. It served you well to get you where you are right now, and it's never going to stop. The moment you drop this form, you will truly be in the oneness of your spiritual energy. Be that in this form now, and you see the world that you will create. You see the world. Truly see the world. I'm excited about the feelings that we felt here. So thank you again, Harry and Greg. Because as Greg beautifully said, this isn't just about one of us. It's the orchestra coming together. And we're all playing. We're all playing. Not a role. We're just flowing. We're all playing. And in that playing, I see you and you see me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. This was truly amazing. And thanks everybody for showing up today. And I'd like to wish everybody happy holidays. This will be our last session for this year, so we'll see you guys in January on the first Sunday. All right, take care, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and unmute everybody so we can all say goodbye and thank you and everything.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was great. Happy holidays.
Bye.